but I am the president and co-founder of an organization called the Wildlife Center of Virginia. The Wildlife Center is a teaching and research hospital for native wildlife. Now, most of you are here because you have a relationship with us of one sort or another. Many of you are donors. We appreciate that. We are not your tax dollars at work. We are your philanthropic dollars at work. And we're willing to work harder if you want to give more. But the truth is that our organization is truly one of the preeminent wildlife hospitals in the entire world. Now, the only credit I take for that is I hire a world-class staff, give them direction, and then stay the heck out of their way. Then take credit for their work, of course. But the fact is that I get to do the fun stuff, and that's what we're talking about today. Before I get any further, let me also acknowledge one of my colleagues from the Wildlife Center. Lisa Simmer is a member of our board of directors, actually vice chair of our board of directors. This is her first eagle release, too. So she has been a friend and supporter of the Wildlife Center since almost the very, very beginning, working in human health care, and she was a laboratory director and managed to let us get our animal samples tested in her human laboratory. So I guess her pathologist, it was like going to the zoo under the microscope looking at a different kind of blood than their normal routine. But the fact is that it's that type of partnership we formed that has enabled us to discover many of the findings we have about environmental problems affecting wildlife. Joe and I were just talking a little while ago about what is now an extremely critical concern, and that is lead poisoning in eagles. And one of the things we are seeing with increasing frequency is that hunters in the field leave all or part of an animal in the field with even a shard of lead, just a fragment of a bullet. And this is not people doing anything illegal or inappropriate or immoral. It's just the nature of the type of ammunition that's commonly used. And even a piece of lead that is the size of a pencil lead, tiny, tiny, tiny piece of lead, is enough to kill a bald eagle if it ingests a piece of meat that contains that. Because when the meat is digested away, that lead is exposed to the stomach juices, and that lead goes into the system very, very, very quickly. We had a bird brought in to us from down in this neck of the woods around the first of the year. It had one, no, actually the bird I'm speaking of came from Eastern Shore, but we've had several from here as well. But the case I want to share with you is one single pellet of double-aught buck. You've heard of buckshot. Well, buckshot is a shotgun shell that has in it 9 little pellets that are smaller than the size of a green pea. And those 9 pellets, each one becomes a toxic time bomb, and this bird ingested one. And by the time it swallowed it, it passed through its digestive system and made it into its intestinal tract. The lead levels in that bird got so high, our testing equipment couldn't even measure it. It was that high. And we're talking about 48 hours. So it's a really critical issue. It's going to be a very difficult issue to deal with politically, but it's the kind of thing that we have to approach incrementally. And the refuge system, actually with Joe's leadership, is considering, if it hasn't already, banning all lead ammunition. It's certainly already been banned for waterfowl hunting nationally. And again, the refuge system and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service led that effort. It was a difficult, years-long battle. And now, if we're talking about banning lead ammunition for upland game, that's going to be another very difficult struggle. And being a firearms collector and shooter and former shooting instructor, people feel pretty passionately about their guns, as do I. But the fact is that we also feel passionately about the eagles. And part of what we at the Wildlife Center are trying to do is to keep it from being about emotion, to make sure it's about scientific information. So at the Wildlife Center, we've been around for not quite 28 years now, but we have treated somewhere around 55,000 wild animals. And we are the only place in Virginia authorized to provide long-term care for bald and golden eagles. Last year we received 40 bald eagles and 1 golden eagle. And this is about, I think this year it's been about 10. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head. This is the first one that we've had the opportunity to release in 2010, and we're glad to bring it home. It's found not so very far from here. Some of the work that the Wildlife Center does is obvious. We fix broken animals. This bird has come in. It was found on the ground, had an old eye injury that probably came from a collision or a blow to the head. It had wounds on its feet, and it was thin, dehydrated, just generally weak and kind of beaten up. And what we concluded is this bird probably had been in a fight with another eagle. Now that is nature at work. That's what happens. The habitat that's available to them fills up when they're nesting in December, January, February. They are fiercely defensive of their nesting territories, and they get into some hellacious fights. I'm telling you, they do a lot of damage to each other. But in this case, the bird was not seriously injured, and we were able to give it an exam. We found no broken bones at all. The eye injury healed. We treated it with antifungals, which is to prevent the onset of a fungal infection in the respiratory system called aspergillosis. The aspergillus fungus is endemic. It's found everywhere in the environment, and it is in almost all of these birds, but it will bloom into a deadly lung infection if the bird is weakened and its immune system compromised. And so we treat with antifungals to prevent that. We treated it with antibiotics to keep the puncture wounds on its legs and feet and the injury in its eye from developing any infection, and then it was just a matter of feeding her up, getting her rehydrated with fluids, and then getting her into a flight cage where she could build her strength back up and be ready to go. Now I saw that somewhere around here, I see some of my other colleagues who are here temporarily with the Wildlife Center, and to be honest with you, I can't even tell you where they're from. But students who are working with us, learning the skills, volunteering their time to gain skills that hopefully they will take into their own careers and go elsewhere to be able to benefit wildlife in other settings, other communities, and in many cases in other ways. So what we're going to do here this morning is we'll first of all get positioned, and then I'll bring the bird out of the cage. Then I'm going to call on our student labor force here. You know, you can always get more students, so if they're mortally wounded, just push the one that's bleeding out of the way, and we'll call the next one forward. There's so many waiting to come to the center. But we'll remove the bumpers off the wing. The bird, when it comes out, I haven't looked under here. You heard how animated she is. She's a pretty big bird, so it'll be a bit of a wrestling match. But we'll get her out. Hopefully, she's still got bumpers on, actually on her wrist. So when her wings are folded, they're in like this. And in the cage, whenever I careen around the corners, they will tend to put their wings out, just like if you're sitting in a chair and it starts to tip over, your reaction, your reflex, is to throw your arms out. Well, the same is true for them with their wings, and we've learned over the years that the metal grating in the cage is difficult to deal with when they're hitting with their wrists. And so we just pat them up, everything's fine, but we've got to take that off first. We'll look at the bird just to be sure there's nothing obvious. We've only ever, all the years we've been releasing eagles, we've only ever gotten to the release site and then had to turn around and take the bird back one time, which was fortunately in front of a very small crowd. We've learned a lot since then. But somebody did have a video of that, actually, that I found on YouTube from back about 15 years ago. So like, don't go looking for that one. But the truth is, then we'll give you a chance. Everybody wants to see this bird. This is an adult bald eagle, and she's a big bird. And so we will, I will hold her as firmly as need be, and I will walk around so that everyone can get a chance to get a good look at her and to get some close-up pictures, but I'm going to keep moving, because once I get her out and we start this process, we've got to move pretty deliberately to getting her back into the wild. Now, the wind is dropping, and that's good, but what I'm going to do, once we get her out, is I will walk out here a little bit, and then I'm going to ask you all to sort of form a horseshoe behind me. And you can come around to the sides, but give me about 6 or 7 feet on any side. We'll make it 10. That'd be better yet, just in case she gets away from me. We don't, you know, our insurance man has got an involuntary neck twitch. As I said, he doesn't know why. We don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want to get hurt. And with their wings as large as they are, literally, if she were to, you know, tip over, flap a wing out, and hit something as solid even as your body, she could break a bone, and we don't want that to happen. Then we'll get everybody in position, everybody's cameras ready, we'll count it down, and then we will launch her